through training will be conducting that webinar. Okay, so just as a reminder, we are trying to have a dialogue here and not a lecture. So we are going to hopefully have a lot of discussion, some case review, and I hope to hear from all of you as we go through our content for the day. So one other housekeeping item that I will request of you is that you please mute your line when you're not addressing the group. So I really want to hear from you, so I don't want you to stay muted the whole time. But background noise is really distracting, and the death knell of any webinar is when someone is not muted and puts us on hold and there's hold music playing. So please just mute your line when you're not talking and unmute when you want to speak. So thank you very much for participating in that particular way so that we can all hear each other. All right, so as a reminder, our overarching framework in motivational interviewing these days, we have these 4 processes through which we are trying to move over the course of either one conversation or many conversations. So we may not get through all of this in one discussion, but this is over a period of whatever time and whatever number of conversations, the kind of arc of a motivational interviewing collaboration with a patient. So if we are thinking about, in particular today, importance and confidence and their role in building motivation for change, I'm curious what you guys think about which process are these kinds of discussions about importance and confidence most likely to show up. Anybody have any thoughts about that? Where is importance going to be a big factor? All right, it's early in the webinar. I will provide my thoughts about this, but please get ready to chime in so that it's not me talking the whole time. So importance, I think, shows up in a few different cases. So one important place in which we might have discussions about importance is in the process of focusing. So if we are trying to have a conversation with a patient about a particular topic, and that topic is not at all important to them, then we are probably going to struggle to get very far in that conversation. So importance is probably going to have some bearing in our process of focusing. Now, of course, if we're trying to talk about the importance of a particular change, importance is also going to be a part of evocation. So that evocation phase of our conversation is where we're really trying to evoke change talk, to draw up their reasons to change, their desire to change, ability to change, etc. So in the evocation phase, we're probably going to try to find out how important this change is to them and potentially help increase the level of importance. So how about for confidence? I've gotten the conversation ball rolling with my thoughts on importance, and I'm curious whether anybody is willing to make any comments about where confidence might be a factor. And there might be some overlap with some of the things that I just said. I have some other thoughts about maybe ways in which confidence shows up and importance doesn't. So I'm curious if anyone is willing to share about that.
Do you mean like confidence in somebody's ability to make a change?
Yes, that is precisely what I mean.
Okay. I don't know how to answer that.
Okay.
I'm having a hard time hearing whether you're saying confidence or competence.
Confidence with an F. Yeah, confidence. The belief that change is possible, that I can make change. Yeah. Was someone from the Dalles going to say something?
Yeah, this is Jane. And
hey, Jane.
What I was going to say is, obviously, there's confidence on both sides of this equation, but from the person who's actually talking with the individual, the client, and your belief that you have the ability to actually engage this person and to focus and to do, some evoking and, using their words and pointing out what they already know about the change reason. But then obviously confidence in, as the person plans, do I really have it in me, and do I believe that my reasons are stronger than my desire not to do the behavior, whatever that is.
Right. So that is something, absolutely. So there's a certain level of confidence that we as a practitioner need to bring to the interaction. That's part of our job as a facilitator of change, is to have a sense of right? I think that is, and I think many people in the early days of their practice with motivational interviewing don't have that much confidence, because it is a particular skill set. It does take practice. And I think that is a good thing to acknowledge, that over time, our own confidence and our skills to facilitate a conversation about change effectively will improve with practice. So then the other piece is, what is the client's perspective on whether they believe that they can follow through on change, even if they, want to make a change. Sometimes people are stuck not because they don't want to, but they don't believe they can. So that might be something to explore also in the evocation phase, understanding what their perspective is on what skills or strengths they bring to the change equation. And then there's also, in the planning phase, a potential area of rich discussion around confidence to follow through on a plan. So my perception, and this is not, factual, this is my opinion, that importance is a big factor in focusing and evoking, and confidence is a big factor in evoking and planning. So it seems like we have perhaps some need to talk a little bit about what we mean by importance and confidence in this context. So importance is relating to the sense of how important is it to me to make these changes that are under discussion, or to try to work on improving this health variable or change goal. So some areas where you might find low importance, some scenarios where you might find low importance is, I've given some examples here. So potentially if you have an asymptomatic condition where someone's not experiencing any consequences. So there's like a delayed consequences to not changing. And so the flip side of that is that last bullet where there's delayed benefits to changing. So in that scenario, sometimes it doesn't feel that important because it's not very immediate. I think in a situation where you have addictive behaviors, it also can sometimes feel like importance is low, because the compulsion of the addiction is driving a sense that this is not important to change because it's hard to even imagine, or it's something I've relied on, or whatever that might be. Of course, there are always many competing priorities for everyone, and it might be family dynamics and obligations, financial strain, lack of resources, work demands, other personal health priorities. So there can be a lot of reasons why people might think that a particular topic is not high on their priority list. So one thing that we want to avoid doing, of course, is assuming that if the particular health behavior that we're discussing is not important to our clients, that overall their health is not important to them. Because this is, what we're talking about here is very specific behaviors or specific change areas, not globally someone's health is important or not, but that specifically quitting smoking is important or not, or specifically that getting more exercise is important or not. So that's what we're talking about. And the same is true with confidence. We're not talking about global confidence, but specific confidence relative to a specific health behavior. So some situations where people might find low confidence is if you have maybe an overweight patient who's tried every diet under the sun and is no longer confident that anything will work. And that's a really common scenario, right, where many, many people who have struggled with their weight have tried a lot of things in the past or have intended to try and not succeeded. Long-term smoker, again, somebody who has an addiction of some kind who has maybe also tried in the past to change and has not succeeded. An elderly patient who has multiple medications and complex health situation and perhaps does not have the mental faculties to keep up with the complexity of their medication regimen. Maybe someone who is wanting to improve their blood sugar control but is having a hard time within their cultural environment thinking about how to change their diet. So this is something that came up for me when I was doing health coaching work and talking to people, people from, and I remember a specific client who was from an Asian culture, and I actually cannot remember specifically what her native culture was, but she talked about white rice and how that's a big part of their diet, and it felt culturally embedded, and changing to brown rice seemed really difficult to imagine. So I think a lot of times people's confidence is either affected by past experience or by environmental constraints or factors. So let's keep going, and we'll come back to this question of scenarios where importance or confidence is low. And I want to hear from you guys about that. So be thinking about that as we go through. What are some situations that you've seen where you've seen low importance or confidence in the patients that you have conversations with using motivational interviewing? Any questions at this point? Is it clear what I mean now about importance and confidence?
It's getting more clear.
Okay, do you have a specific question that would help clarify it further?
No, it's just that this is my first motivational interviews webinar, so that's why I think the lingo is just taking a little while.
Okay, so do you have prior experience at MI?
No, only very peripherally.
Okay, well then yes, that makes sense that would not be totally clear to you. So feel free to ask more questions. There probably will be a number of things that I say that won't quite make sense because this is intended to be like a follow-up to some previous training so that you know this lingo type stuff. I think you'll catch on. And feel free to ask questions, and I will try to explain things as best as possible.
Thank you.
Okay, sure, you bet. Okay, so we have Motivation Mountain here. So you guys who have come to training should remember this notion that we have a mountain to climb in terms of building motivation to change, that people experience ambivalence about change. Part of what we're doing through motivational interviewing conversations is helping people consider that ambivalence and to think about what would make them want to come down on the side of change. So weighing out the pros and cons, thinking about the benefits of staying the same versus the benefits of changing, thinking about their overall life goals and values, concerns, health priorities, etc., trying to help them climb up that slope of ambivalence and move towards the downward side of the mountain where we're actually creating change plans. We're more action-oriented. We might talk about barriers or specific supportive factors and really move into the action phase. And you can see how this maps with the stages of change model across the bottom of the screen as well. So when we're having discussions about importance and confidence, thinking about this in terms of Motivation Mountain, where do you think those discussions might show up on Motivation Mountain? So let's start by importance. Where on Motivation Mountain are conversations about importance going to be particularly useful?
Would it be pre-contemplation right at the start of the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about why you thought that.
Well, if the person isn't interested in the topic at all, then there's really no point in trying to talk to them about changing it if it's not something they want to do.
Right. Exactly. So if we're trying to have discussions about action planning, but our patient is actually in pre-contemplation and doesn't even think the change is important, that's not going to go very far. So that might be a time in which we want to have a discussion about importance and try to raise the level of importance to help them move potentially from pre-contemplation to contemplation.
Meet them where they're at.
Yeah, exactly. Meet them where they're at. And that's part of what makes motivational interviewing so useful as a clinical intervention, because we can work with people no matter what their starting point is. So in some kinds of health promotion interventions, we kind of need someone to already be in preparation in order to help them move towards action. So if we're doing like brief action planning or something like that, then we have to have a patient who's already motivated on some level to come up with an action plan. So motivational interviewing is really helpful because it can help us work with people who are in pre-contemplation and help them potentially move closer towards readiness for action. So any other notions about where importance might be useful here?
This is Jane at North Central again, and honestly, I think it hits absolutely every step of the way because I in fact, just had a conversation with a coworker this morning who's struggling with making some behavior changes, health behavior changes around physical activity and diet as it relates to her blood pressure and blood sugars. And the level of importance to her is absolutely critical to change the behavior she knows she needs to around physical activity and diet to avoid having to take medication, because it's really important for her not to do that. So, you know, while pre-contemplation, absolutely, I think all along the way, it's just absolutely critical.
Yeah,
that you know, the person, you know, it's so important to them that it becomes more important than not doing the things that they really want to set out to do to improve their health or their situation.
Right, because motivation is dynamic and change is hard. And so if there is not a sustained sense of importance, then backsliding is quite likely, right?
Yeah.
Even in maintenance, people who have made a change, they're in maintenance, they get into a stressful situation, their life circumstances change, something makes it more difficult for them to maintain whatever the health behavior is, and they slide back. In order to not slide all the way back to pre-contemplation, then they need to have some sense that this is important. And if they lose that, then we're going to have to assume that they're not going to be as rapid in returning to their healthy behavior because it's just important enough. Yeah, so I think that's a very good point. So how about for confidence? Where on Motivation Mountain is confidence going to be particularly important? Oh, someone also supplied a comment in the chat box about importance that it could be useful when the person is trying to decide what change to focus on between multiple choices. So that's absolutely true. Many times people have a bunch of different health changes that would improve their health, and they can't do all of them at once, and so you have to figure out where are we going to start. And having a conversation about importance can be very useful in that process. So I would think that the same goes for confidence, that if you have someone who has a bunch of different health changes that they could make and they are really not confident on some and fairly confident on others, then it might be useful to have a conversation about starting with one where they feel more confident so they can have some experiences of success and begin to build their sense of self-efficacy, their sense of confidence that they can make some of those tougher changes. Any other thoughts on where confidence might be a big factor?
The action step if you can, prep and do everything, but following through and maintaining would be really hard if you're not confident.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think, in the same way that Jane was saying, importance is important all along the way. Confidence probably is to a degree as well. Like if you are really lacking confidence in pre-contemplation and you feel really, really unsure about yourself, it's going to be hard to think about trying to move towards action if you are afraid that you're setting yourself up for failure. So it's probably relevant along the way, but I would agree with you, I think that was Megan just speaking, that it's particularly important when you get to the action phase of do you feel confident that you can follow through on this plan that we have come up with? And if not, what's wrong with the plan? How can we come up with a plan together that you feel like you can have some success with? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how we can work with these aspects of motivation in the context of a conversation. So we have a sense that they're important, and they're going to be important to both helping people climb the mountain in terms of getting motivated to make a change, and then helping them proceed into the action phase and to actually succeed in making a change. Okay, so one way to do that is using the good old ruler questions. So we start by asking people, how important is this, or how confident do you feel about this change on a scale of 1 to 10? And then we ask, why is it that high and not a lower number? Even if it's a 3, we would say, why is it a 3 and not a 1? So what is our reason for doing that? So there's lots of strategy packed in there. What are we trying to accomplish by asking that question?
Well, you want to, this is Jane again, you want the client to tell you like how important that is or how confident they feel. So they're going to be ending, or they're going to be giving you what you want them to say.
Right. So you want them to have the opportunity to articulate why it is important. So even if it's only a 3, it's not a 1, so what's making it a 3? So you're asking them to talk about why it's important or why they feel confident. So there's so many reasons why we do this. So one is that motivational interviewing is based on the premise that people are convinced by what they hear themselves saying. So our goal is to support people in talking themselves into the changes that they want to make in their lives. So this is an opportunity, this is a way we can structure our conversations so that they are doing that. They are voicing their reasons for change or their reasons for feeling that it's important or confident. And then it also gives us, as a facilitator in the conversation, some more fodder for where we can go from there. So we have more understanding of where they're coming from, what their experience is. So one useful way to think about this then is not really as an assessment per se. We're not doing like a clinical assessment. What we're doing is trying to understand where they're coming from and getting a better sense of where we need to go in the conversation, and also potentially helping them change their sense of importance or confidence through this conversational structure. So then we follow that question. Once we hear the answer to why is it a 3 and not a 1, we can offer some reflections of what we heard, demonstrate empathy, and then say, what would it take to make this more important to you? Or what would it take for you to feel more confident? And if someone's a 3, we're not going to say, what would it take to get to a 10? But we'll say, what would it take to get to a 5? What would cause this to change for you? So the second question is another way of asking if you are working with somebody for whom they're expressing that this is not important at all to them, and you perhaps think it's clinically very important, or they're not at all confident and you want them to think about people who support them and believe in them, what they might say about it. So this is just another way to ask, to structure the dialogue. So again, this is not about assessment, it's about creating conversation. The image across the bottom is if you have someone with numeracy problems and you don't want to use numbers, you can use this kind of visual scale. You can just use words, not at all important, kind of important, very important, or you can use those images like small, medium, large sized people icons or whatever to show to convey the scale. Any questions about the rulers? Okay, I'm going to keep going because I have actually a lot of content on the next few slides. And what I'm going to do probably is kind of just go through it, pause a couple times to ask for questions, and then we're going to go back to discussion mode and talk about some cases. So I'm going to want to be hearing from you. And one thing to keep in mind is that the focus of this training series, in addition to being on motivational interviewing skills broadly, is also on smoking cessation intervention specifically. So if you have any clients you're working with on issues relating to tobacco, that would be a good thing for us to talk about today.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Absolutely.
On the picture scale, has that been used like within multiculturally as far as those pictures for people who are illiterate? I'm just wondering how you describe those pictures to people who are not literate.
I have not done that. I think you could, I think what you'd want to do is probably have, if you wanted to use an image, it could be people icon, it could be anything. I mean, you could take any image and put like a small version of it on one end, a medium-sized version, and a large-sized version, just to show, it could be a star, it could be a tree, it could be anything, just to show like the small, medium, large, or like progression. And then I would explain it, you know, to say down here, this small image means not at all important. You know, in the middle, kind of important, up on this end, very, very important. And yeah, like I'm not sure it would stand alone, but I think if you talked about it with them, you could use your description to make it clear.
Sure. I just wondered how much it had been researched or used in that.
I don't think it's been researched. I think it's just a suggestion as to working with people with different language or number skills, a way to work around that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so another strategy for evoking importance. If you have someone for whom something that you think is clinically very important that they don't think is important, one thing you might want to do is share some information as to why you as a healthcare professional think that this is very important. So the way we do that in MI is by asking permission or giving permission to disregard and emphasizing autonomy. So asking permission would sound like, is it okay if I share some information with you about why it might be important to make this change based on what we know leads to better health? So this is a way of conveying respect and creating partnership. So emphasizing autonomy and giving permission to disregard are connected. So it could sound something like this. It's up to you to decide what to do with this information. So that's an autonomy emphasis. Or you could say something like, you know, you're the expert on your own life. I'd love to share some information with you today, and then you can take it or leave it because it's really your choice what to do from here. And so, of course, you want them to care about what you care about as a clinician. But we are trying to create engagement and activation and remind people that they are actually in charge of their own lives. It's not up to us to make these choices. And so the more we say that to them and the more we hear ourselves say it, the more we're creating a relational dynamic where we don't feel responsible for their decision-making process because we're not and we can't be, and where they feel more responsible and more activated and more engaged and perhaps more confident, have more of a sense of, yeah, this is up to me. And then we also might use the ask, tell, ask, elicit, provide, elicit. There's different words that people use to describe this, but it's the same dynamic where we start by asking people, well, what do you already know about the effect of tobacco on your blood pressure? Or what do you already know about the effect of drinking wine in the evening on your blood sugar? So whatever it is, we ask you, what do you already know about this? Can I share some additional information with you? So once we've heard about what they know, then if we think they're missing something, we can share that and then ask for their reaction. That's the second ask. What do you think about that? What does this mean to you? So of course we want to give one piece of information at a time or just small bits of information at a time using plain language for health literacy, so helping people be able to comprehend what we're sharing with them. And I think we have a whole webinar devoted to this topic, so I'm going to move on. But I just wanted to remind you that that might be one way in which you might help people have a different kind of sense of importance about a particular health topic. Some other strategies for evoking importance. We might use open-ended questions. So asking people, what are the downsides of not changing? So what might happen if you don't make this change? What worries you if you think about 5 years from now? What it could look like if you don't make this change? We also are asking about the benefits of making a change. So how would this serve you? What are some of the things in your life that are important? And how does this prospect of making the change, or how does continuing with this behavior fit with those things? So we're trying to understand what their values are, what they care about, and trying to help them connect the dots between those core values and goals and whatever the topic is that we're discussing. So it's all part of this exploring ambivalence kind of concept, which we can do by directly asking about the benefits and downsides of the status quo, and which we can also do by asking all kinds of other open-ended questions in terms of what would a really good outcome for this look like to you, or what are the changes that you think would be most beneficial to your health. So asking these just really evocative open questions to understand their perspective on why something might be important to change. So amplified reflection is something that we should use with caution. It's a way of kind of overstating their ambivalence in the hope that they'll back down. We have to be very careful not to sound sarcastic or judgmental, and to be very, very neutral in our delivery. So if someone says, you know, I really don't think smoking is that big of a deal. I'm young. It's fine. I don't have any problems. I don't have a cough. It's fine. We might respond by saying, you see no harm at all in maintaining your current behavior. And our hope is that the person will acknowledge, well, you know, maybe it's not causing harm right now, but eventually smoking would catch up with anybody, and I'm going to have to take a look at it at some point. So then you might see there's an opening to have a conversation, to say, so you're actually, some part of you is a little bit worried about where this might go if you don't make this change at some point. You're thinking, surely at some point this is going to catch up with me. And so then you can continue to have a conversation exploring their perspective. And the other thing you can find out is if you offer an amplified reflection and the person agrees with you, yeah, there's no harm, then that might be a signal that you need to change focus, that they are really not ready to talk about that particular thing as important for their health. Okay, so let's go on to talk about confidence. Before we do that, I'm wondering whether anybody has any questions or comments about the importance piece. Okay.
This is Jane. It's not really. It's just, other than it's really important to figure that out so that you're not hitting your head against the wall.
Right. I agree. You have precious little time with your patients and clients, and if you're barking up the wrong tree, you're not making very good use of it. And so it is really helpful to find out whether your agenda matches with theirs in terms of what's important, and if not, then what is important to them relating to their health. If you have enough openness in your role and your setting that you could talk about something different relating to health behavior, then you might have a much more fruitful conversation if you switch topics. If you really, really want to talk about smoking and they would much rather talk about eating, then probably better to talk about eating. And then maybe you can come back to smoking later, but you're going to be more likely to help them make change if you're talking about something that's important to them, and at a basic level to keep them engaged and to convey value to them in some way so that they want to come back and talk to you again. Okay, so thinking about hope and confidence. So hope is the belief that change is possible. This statement, I believe that change is possible. Confidence is change is possible and I can contribute to making it happen. So part of what happens when people get really stuck is that the world can start to feel really small, the sense of possibility closes in, people have this feeling of having blinders on or being in a tunnel and they can't see past the immediacy of their stuckness. And what we can do as a facilitator of change is try to help them expand that and to connect to some larger sense of possibility, hopefulness, there's a way out, I can have something to do with it. So a lot of the things that I'm going to describe now in terms of working with confidence are about how we can lend people hope, lend people confidence, try to rub our little sticks together to get a fire going, and then to hope that that little glimmer of confidence that we can figure out how to fan the flames with them and evoke more of a sense of hopefulness and confidence. Okay, so here are some strategies for evoking confidence. So we can ask about personal strengths and abilities. We can inquire about past success, and it might be past success in this particular area. If someone is a smoker and they've quit before, even if they've come back to smoking, we can ask about how they did it in the past, and then we can reframe that discussion. Rather than saying that was a failed attempt in the past, we can say, you have been building your change muscles. Or maybe you have succeeded in figuring out some things that don't work for you. So one anecdote that I like to share with people is the story about Thomas Edison, who tried many, many times to invent the light bulb before he succeeded. And one time a journalist asked him, how did it feel to fail 1,000 times as an inventor? And he said, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I found out 1,000 ways that didn't work. And that helped me find the way that did work. And that kind of attitude can help us think about failed attempts not as failures, but as a way of building our change muscles and making progress towards a strategy that is going to work. Many times people get very stuck in black and white thinking and really discard small changes or dismiss the importance of taking baby steps. And we might be able to help them acknowledge that, to say, this sounds like black and white thinking to me. I'm hearing a couple of baby steps that you've taken that show how important this is to you and that you really do have the ability to make some change. We maybe acknowledge hopelessness. So we say, you know, I can hear that you feel really hopeless about it. And from my perspective, I want to say, you know, I hear that you feel hopeless, but that's not the same as being a hopeless case. And I'm confident that if we continue to work together on this, we'll be able to find a way that you can begin to take some steps forward on this change that you want to make. You might state your observations about the person's strengths, or you might inquire about sources of support. So to ask, you know, what in your life supports you and would make you feel more confident and beginning to move forward, and how might you connect more fully to those sources of support. So some other ways, these are specific questions, and you'll see that these are kind of more perhaps tactical examples of some of the strategies that I just described. So this first question is asking about past success, but maybe doing it not relative to the specific behavior that you're discussing. So maybe not asking about past smoking quitting attempts, but to say more generally, has there ever been a time when you were pretty sure you weren't going to be able to make some kind of change, but you surprised yourself by your success? And then hear a little bit about that, and then maybe ask, like, what do you think it was about you in that situation that allowed you to succeed, and how can you reconnect to some of those strengths now? So then another strategy is to ask someone to kind of step outside themselves. This goes back to that strategy I was describing with the rulers, because people who are stuck oftentimes really don't believe in themselves and maybe are really lacking confidence. And so to say, not what do you think of your strengths, but if your best friend were describing your strengths, or if your mom was describing your strengths, what do you think he or she would say? And find out, maybe you can maybe kind of back your way into hearing about someone's strengths, even if they feel very uncomfortable in just stating them themselves. So this other one, the next one, kind of tries to accomplish the same goal and is silly. So I like it. So if you were to say, if you were a contestant in an imaginary bragging contest and you really wanted to win the prize, what would you say about yourself? So again, giving someone who is really lacking confidence permission to voice something about their own strengths. Another way to do this is to be very hypothetical. So to say that this is safe. It's safe for you to think about your strengths because I'm not pushing you towards anything. This is all make-believe. Let's pretend you're successful in changing this. What do you think about you as a person will have made that possible? Or, again, asking about small successes, baby step accomplishments from past experience. Okay, so another way that we can work with confidence is using metaphor. So this first one is, again, trying to reframe black and white thinking into this gray area of baby steps, making a change to a habit, kind of like learning to walk. We don't scold a toddler for falling down as they're learning how to go from crawling to walking. So what would it be like to be that encouraging with yourself? To think about yourself as kind of like a toddler who's just learning to walk for the first time. This is a new skill that you're trying to do. And there was a time in your life where you accepted that as normal, that as a kid you have to stumble a bit as you learn new things. And what would it be like to bring that attitude back? Another metaphor might be to say, you're on this one side of this big divide and you really want to get across, but you're not really sure how. But it's really clear that you're going to find a way to build a bridge, that it's really important to you to cross this chasm, to cross this river. Another way of reframing black and white thinking, helping people think about small steps, because a big part of confidence is figuring out how to take some small steps and to create a doable goal and attain it, and then to use that momentum to kind of figure out some additional small steps. So to say, perhaps, you might feel like you want to leap to the very top of this staircase, but what would it look like to just climb up the next 2 steps?
Yep.
And you could use a ladder as well if you wanted instead of a staircase. So to climb up just the first couple rungs. And then an affirmation could be, you've really been thinking about this a lot, and all that focus is helping you to get the pieces of the puzzle in place. And you're still not quite sure how it's all going to fit together. But it seems like you've really been working on this jigsaw for a while, and all that focus is going to help you make progress in time. Okay, any questions about those confidence strategies? Okay, so let's hear from you. You guys can, if anybody has a case that's relating to either importance or confidence or both, I'd love to hear about a patient who you've worked with where you had the sense that either their importance or confidence was low. What was going on? What could you do to help them? Maybe this is a case that you are currently working on and you need help with. Maybe you have a story about a recent success where you were able to use motivational interviewing to help raise someone's importance or confidence that you can tell us about. If you have any questions about any of the strategies I just described, feel free to ask those as well. So I'm hearing a lot of background noise. Again, if you're not talking, if you could mute your line, that would be great. Okay, does anyone have any stories to share about importance or confidence, cases to discuss, questions, comments, philosophical ideas?
I've had a number of patients that are morbidly obese and pretty much stuck in bed but want to change, but following through with the therapy, the physical therapy, or doing the exercises, the ability has not really been there.
Yeah.
They're confident in their ability to change, but seem to lack follow through.
Okay, so in your conversations with them, they express confidence, but then are not following through?
Right, even with like setting a simple goal of tomorrow I'm going to walk to the kitchen twice a day instead of doing it once. They're just not able to meet that goal.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what kind of strategies have you been using to follow up with them about that kind of stuckness?
Trying to figure out where, what's been the barrier, what's been keeping them from making that change. And, you know, it's usually I wasn't feeling good today, I just didn't want to do it. I feel like a lot of times they want to see the end result, but aren't willing to necessarily do the work to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so does anyone have any ideas about how you might approach that? That sounds like a tough situation where people are really they have a pretty entrenched set of habits that are going to be very hard to change.
How about asking on the day that you were able to walk to the kitchen, what was different, or what things were going on that you felt you could do it? Mm-hmm. And you know, that providing hope or lending them some hope when it, you know, taking the path of least resistance is so much easier is really a challenge, or what, you know, maybe even exploring. So you weren't feeling well, what about, you know, what makes you feel better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so trying to evoke their thoughts about past success, or what might help them feel well enough on a particular day to undertake that effort.
The other
someone
thing
else
too
going, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Jane.
Oh, I was just going to say, a lot of times people don't acknowledge that after they exert themselves that way, the sense of pride, or that, you know, if they stop for a moment, they really do feel better. Well, maybe their legs or their feet or their back hurt, and to try and focus on how do you feel after you do that.
Right.
You know, so that
yeah,
that's kind of its reward. Like, I know I'm going to feel better if I do it.
Right. So trying to ask about the benefits of making the change and trying to help them get very immediate about that and really concrete about that. And thinking about not just the physical benefits potentially, maybe acknowledging some of the physical challenges of making the change, but what are the other kind of benefits you might experience that would make the challenge worth it? Was someone else going to put forth an idea?
Yeah, this is Jean. I'm from the nurse from the Virginia Garcia Clinic.
Hello.
I found that people with, especially with weight change, like if they get a sponsor like in a 12-step program, like somebody who's maybe close to them in weight, who, you know, is kind of on the journey maybe a little bit ahead of them, that they talk to regularly, that really helps them. It's hard for them to look at somebody who's maybe thin or looks healthy and in great shape, that they're going to want to listen to that person, because it's like, how do you know
right
what I'm going through if, you know, they're 300 pounds and you're 150 pounds? It just doesn't.
Right.
You know, they just kind of are cynical sometimes about listening to you, because like you have no idea what I'm going through. At least
right. So,
but anyway, I've seen people lose 150 pounds when they were able to find
wow.
a sponsor in that kind of program, where somebody who they can see, you know, they can relate to.
Right. Yeah, so that's a really a great point, that it could be that bringing in some additional sources of support or resources in the change effort might be really helpful. Peer support can be huge. And I think also that the kind of really like close accountability that can come from having a sponsor can be extremely helpful. To have someone who will check in with you and to really hold your hand as you go along, someone who you relate to and trust. I think that's a really good point. Another idea that occurs to me, in addition to asking, as Jane was suggesting, about past success, to ask about personal strengths, to say, so let's say, kind of using one of the questions that I have on here. So let's say that you're successful in meeting this goal of getting up and taking this little walk a couple times a day. What about you will have made that happen? What is the personal strength that you're bringing to this scenario? And if they can't answer, because sometimes people really feel badly about themselves, right? And they might struggle to answer that question. Then that might be an opportunity to use one of those other questions, like, well, what if your best friend was going to talk about this? Or what if one of your family members who you love and loves you back? Or what if you were a contestant in an imaginary bragging contest, if you have a client with a good sense of humor that you can ask that of? And to try to focus on what internal resources they can draw upon to keep themselves going. And then maybe to ask the question of, what might help you stay connected with that? What could you put up near your bed that would remind you of that strength that you have? Or something along those lines, to try to help them get a sense of what they're bringing, what personal assets and strengths they have, and how to stay connected to that. Any other thoughts or any reaction from you, Megan? I think that was Megan that was speaking before, on whether any of those strategies seem helpful.
I like the, I don't remember the exact wording, but where you said how you'll feel once you you make those few steps, what's in you to make you want to do that. I think those are good questions.
Cool. Yeah, and it may be like combining that with some empathy and transparency about how hard this is, in terms of saying, you know, this is something we've been talking about for a while. It sounds like it's important to you, and it's pretty tough to do consistently. This is it's a big change to be making, and it takes a lot to get up and do it, and acknowledge that, and to acknowledge their lack of progress in some sympathetic, compassionate way, I should say. And then to use the kinds of questions you just said sounded good to you, to say, like, all right, this is tough, and what's going to keep you going? What strengths do you have? How will you feel about yourself if you do it, etc. Okay, we have just a couple minutes left. Does anybody else have any questions or comments about, or short stories about importance or confidence? So one thing that I can recommend to you, it's up to you whether or not to do this, but perhaps to use these slides as a cheat sheet, because there's a lot of stuff tacked on here in terms of big picture strategies, very specific tactics, specific questions, phrasing that you can use, and it might be helpful as you go through your conversations with people to have those to refer to, because if you're working with someone who's really stuck, sometimes you get pulled into the mud with them, and you, especially if you're in the beginning of your MI learning journey and you're less speedy with your own skills, then you might feel kind of stuck too in terms of where are we going to go in this conversation. And so this could be a resource to you in thinking about some different things that you could try. And I really think that if you are using the spirit of MI, you're engaging with your clients and approaching people with a sense of non-judgmental curiosity, you can ask people any of these questions and something interesting will result. And it may not be that the very next thing they say leads to change, but it will help your conversation move along. It will help convey the sense that you are very interested in their experience. You want to hear about their strengths. You want to help them get unstuck. And that it's something that you can discover with them. And so if you remember back to training, I also hand out a couple of handouts in the packet, one that's methods for evoking confidence, and ones with methods for evoking change talk that have a lot of these strategies on them as well. So that's another thing you can use as a resource or cheat sheet. And feel free to get in touch if you have any questions about this webinar or any other topics relating to motivational interviewing. If you have a specific test case that you want some consult on, a success story is always fun to hear. And I appreciate your time and participation today. Please remember also that we will not be meeting in September, but the webinar will resume in October with Verna. And in the meantime, if you have any colleagues who are interested in my training, there's that opportunity coming up in September as well that Diane can get you more information about. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good one. Thanks.